This week in Pure Reinvention.
It was the process of recalling memories, fond memories of my father, that really helped me to reconnect with him.
Episode 168, Cornette Lane, founder, Stories and.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
As we continue to move in the month of March, we are lucky to have Cornette Lane show us exactly what move can look like. Jody, we had a chance to do a podcast with Eric, and he introduced us to this thing about storytelling.
Yep.
But Cornetta took it to a whole next level.
Yeah, this is an interesting one as you guys are about to listen and hear. Cornetta's storytelling actually started from a traumatic event in her life, and how storytelling was a very sort of cathartic way for her to move through that personal trauma, and the value that she felt as the storyteller, and how she realized that there was value in that beyond just her own personal growth. That value could transcend to the private space in terms of helping neighborhoods tell their story and helping businesses tell their story. And so she's a fun one to listen to, because she will tell you she's an activator. She's one that I said I am very unlike. At the start of March, when we were talking about this concept of move, I said, I don't love to play in the realm of the unknown, but I know it's necessary, so I do it. Cornetta craves this. In fact, she seeks out opportunities to play in a space where nothing is yet built, and she likes to try to figure it out. So she has left positions. Once she's created something and it's off and running, she will move on to the next thing, because she is driven by that desire to make, to build, to do. So she's a kind of a living embodiment of this fifth step of pure reinvention.
So if you're ready to listen to someone who's been able to really learn how to take move to the entirely next level by keeping it real and really immersing you into the storytelling experience, stay tuned.
Hi, y'all. I'm so excited to talk to you today about an event that we have coming up on May 22nd, and it's called Connect Detroit.
I'm really excited about the Connect Detroit. It gives us something real and meaningful to sink our teeth into.
This will be something that you'll be expected to immerse yourself in.
We're actually going to be in the spaces where these stories take place, listening to the people who are telling the tale.
Particularly in the case of Connect Detroit, we'll have opportunities to really think about and talk about specific real-life problems or challenges and what the outcome was and how we reached that outcome.
Which is exactly what Connect Detroit is all about. Put people face to face with some sort of experience that's happening right now.
But I'm particularly interested in having an experience that brings high-functioning executives together, experiencing something, problem-solving together.
This is an experience for somebody who's ready for more and, quite frankly, deserves more. So if that's you, Connect Detroit is your program. May 22nd, 50 seats, $500, and wear your walking shoes. You can register today at purereinvention.com/connect-detroit. Connect Detroit now qualifies for CAE credit. Who knew? So for those of you who are in the not-for-profit or association space, it's just one more reason to come out and enjoy a great day.
What an awesome interview we have today. Cornette Lane, founder of Stories and. So let's find out a little bit about you, Cornetta.
Yeah.
Tell us about your background.
Yeah. So born and raised in the city of Detroit, on the west side of Detroit, actually not too far from here in Core City. So it's in between Michigan Avenue and West Grand Boulevard. And then Trumbull to west of where the train station is.
Okay.
Basically, that's
Sure.
where it is.
Sure.
Graduated from Martin Luther King High School, and then went to Wayne State for...
Which, by the way, has some significance because today is Martin Luther King Day.
Yes.
We may be posting this podcast on a different day, but we are capturing it on Martin Luther King Day.
Yes, yes. So that's my alma mater. And matriculated to Wayne State and got my bachelor's degree in Middle Eastern Studies. From there, got into City Year. So I committed a whole year to mentoring and tutoring middle school kids through City Year. It's basically a AmeriCorps program where you devote 1 year of your life to education.
Where did you do that at?
Here in the city.
Here, right in your own town.
Yep, in Detroit. And then from there, I did Challenge Detroit. Challenge Detroit is basically where they partner a young person with a host company. And you do that for a year. You go to work 4 days out of week. And then on the fifth day, you get together with your cohort and you try to solve some of the challenges that some of the nonprofits in Detroit are facing. So my host company was United Way. I was in their marketing team. And then I saw an opportunity to do something different within the organization. And I pitched a new job description to the CEO. He liked it. And he offered me basically the job to create the thing that I created. And that went great. It was awesome. They now have expanded that role to a whole company now. It was when Mike Brennan was CEO of United Way.
Who's now with Sevilla.
Yep. So Adam and Lena, who are also over at Sevilla, helped Brennan to create Sevilla. So
tell us about what you're doing now.
So in 2015, I was sitting at the table with my partner and my mom, and it was January. It was really cold, and we were playing a card game, and my phone rung, and it was my cousin. And my cousin she doesn't usually call me. Usually like we text or we Facebook, but she called, and I was just like, that's a little peculiar. So I answered the phone. She goes, "Hey, Cornetta, how you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm fine." But the tone of her voice, I knew something was off. So I excused myself from the table and I walked into the living room. And she says, your father was in a fight with his wife and it got heated. She pulled out a gun and she shot and killed him. There was nothing in this world that could have prepared me for that news. I stood there as if I was frozen. My legs were just stuck in place. I couldn't move. And she said, "Cornetta, if you need anything, like, please, call me." She didn't have much detail to give me. That it just happened. And as soon as I hung up the phone, I just collapsed. And my partner saw that I was on the ground and he rushed into the living room and he picks me up off the ground and sits me on the couch and he says, what happened? And I told him that, my father had been killed. Later that evening, we turned on the news and the details of my father's murder was on the news. Because again, my cousin didn't have the details, but the news knew everything, right? And so what an awful way to hear about your father's departure. And
through the news.
And it was so impactful to me that I had, fallen into a depression. My father and I had been estranged, but we had just reconnected and we had made plans to go to dinner. We never, went to dinner and we would never get that chance. And so, just every part of my brain was just occupied on what I could have done to reconnect with my father and to make sure that we really did go out to dinner like we made plans to. And so it wasn't until a couple of months later, I was journaling. And I thought to myself,
do you do that a lot?
No, not as much as I should.
Okay.
Not as much as I should.
You believe in it.
I do. I will. And when I say journaling, I actually mean I wrote out a list of things that I wanted to do. So my version of journaling is writing down things that I wish that I could do.
Yeah. Yours is bullet points.
Mine is bullet points. Yes. One of them was to honor my father by sharing his story. And so I reached out to Satori Shakur. She's the founder of Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers. And
Say the name of the
Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers.
Okay.
She is just phenomenal. She's a wonderful woman. She hosts basically a moth-style storytelling event at the Charles H. Wright Museum every month. So I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, Satori, I have a story. I'm kind of interested in sharing it. It's about, my father." And she goes, "Yeah, that sounds good. How about this month?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
How about now? What are we waiting for?
I'm like, "Oh my gosh. Okay. Sure." And she was like, "Don't worry. I'll coach you. I'll get you through it." And so it was the process of recalling fond memories of my father that really helped me to reconnect with him.
Right. Building a new story.
Really understanding that even though he wasn't really a part of my life, there were parts of my memories that I could remember him saying, "I love you," through his action.
Right.
And that for me was enough to kind of get me out of the funk that I was in.
What you're making me kind of really understand is that even though most recent has a definition, it isn't the whole story.
Yeah.
What you did is you went back and recreated the whole story, not the most recent small part of the story, which is fantastic because most of us remember what's most recent.
Yeah.
Not the real whole story. You went back and recreated the whole new story. I mean, the whole story, which changed the definition.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was, it started with me remembering the first time that I had met my father, that I could remember meeting my father. And I think I was like 4 years old, and I was in front of the television watching Saturday morning cartoons. And I was at my uncle's house, and someone yells, "Cornetta, your dad is here." And I perked up and I'm like, "My dad?" So I walked over to the front door, and through the glass window, I can see my dad standing outside. He had these really sharp creased jeans. This was the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And he had his varsity jacket on, and he was standing there.
He was cool.
He was so cool. My dad was so cool. And he spotted me in the door, and he flicked his wrist to say, "Come on out." And I bolted out the door toward him. And no sooner than 2 feet apart, he dropped down to one knee, and he wrapped me into his arms. And that was the first time I remember feeling invincible. My dad's got me, he's got me in his arms. And that was my opening for Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers when I told my story on stage. But it was just remembering that at different points in my life, I felt my dad's love.
So you actually learn yourself the value of storytelling at its core, which then has allowed you to build that into what's next.
Yeah. So
tell us about your company.
Yeah. So my first storytelling project was called Pedal to Porch.
Pedal to Porch.
Yes. And as I said, I was raised in Core City. I was scrolling through my Facebook news feed, and I came across an article that read West Corktown creating Detroit's newest neighborhood. And I thought to myself, in a city as old as Detroit, how do you just create a new neighborhood? So when I clicked on a link, it described an area along I-96 and Michigan Avenue where this new identity was emerging for a neighborhood. And I was like, no, this is what we call Core City.
And
And I know.
That's your neighborhood.
I was raised there. I went to school there. I went to elementary and middle school there. St. Casimir was right around the corner from my house. And right next to my school was Core City Neighborhood, Inc. So I knew it was Core City growing up. And so I was very frustrated. I didn't do anything about it at the time. A few years later, in 2015, I was invited to participate in a fellowship in Toronto called K880, where we were invited to learn what it takes to make a bikeable, walkable city and the power of community storytelling. And it was there that I developed my idea of Pedal to Porch, which was at the time to preserve the historical identity of Core City through storytelling. And so what we would do was we would invite people to get on their bikes and ride from porch to porch, listening to historical narratives of people in the neighborhood.
Why storytelling?
Well, I mean, it was impactful for me. It helped me to heal. And I think being in Toronto and hearing about the different community storytelling initiatives, seeing how people come together through stories was just something that I felt I could replicate in Detroit.
So are you suggesting you can build or rebuild communities of interest by storytelling?
Absolutely. There's a thing that happens when storytelling is effective. It's the person that's telling the story. They are able to connect to memories. They could find different sensory words to really help grab people. It's kind of cathartic. Then the person that's listening is also connecting to memories of what they have and trying to connect it to the story and trying to build out that connection. Oh yeah, I've experienced that too. Really finding something in someone's story that's familiar. And it's the process of speaking and listening that just really creates an atmosphere. We're forgetting about everything that's different from us, and we're attaching to what's
the same. Which is at the core, everything.
Yeah.
So how does a company take advantage of storytelling and this concept of we're more alike than different?
Yeah. So with Pedal to Porch, we hosted Pedal to Porch in my neighborhood, and then other communities were like, oh my gosh, this is great. There's a complete different narrative that people hear about our neighborhood, and we really like to share a different narrative.
So how many Pedal to Porch?
So far we've done 7 Pedal the Porch, 6 in Detroit, 1 in Harper Woods. And this summer we're doing even more in Detroit, and we're actually also expanding to Charlotte. The word kind of got around town about Pedal the Porch, and other people became interested.
It resonated with them.
They were like, "Oh yeah, I'd like to preserve the historical identity of my neighborhood."
See how it could create more alike.
Yeah. And as a result of hosting and Pedal the Porch the first time, residents of Core City were like, "Well, let's organize." And so we launched a 48208 collaborative to really understand like what's happening in our neighborhood, and who's doing what and how we could support each other. So that was like a spinoff. And I just loved like the neighborhood based storytelling. But then what I realized with Dinner for 30 is that there are private spaces. So our porch is kind of a private space, right? You have the street that's public.
Yeah, you have to be invited onto the porch.
Exactly. So when you get onto the porch, it's something that's private. The kitchen is also really private. The kitchen is also the place where people are sharing stories about like, grandma's recipe or whatever it is. And so Dinner for 30 came along. I was like watching Netflix, and I was watching like some like food like show, and I saw just the power of like people breaking bread and getting to know each other. And so Dinner for 30 is essentially where I invite a cook, it could be a home cook or a professional cook, to prepare a dish that's connected to their fondest memory, tell a story about it, and at the end of the story, the audience of 30 gets a chance to taste the dish. And so we're launching for the first time this coming February. We're going to host 5 events to create a Detroit story cookbook. So we're really excited just about being able to preserve those stories beyond the day that they were told.
Can you explain to me why you're doing this kind of work?
Yeah.
And not just get a regular job?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I tried the regular 9-to-5 thing, and it just wasn't fulfilling. This for me is fulfilling.
You're a founder.
I am.
What is it about your personality that allows you to be a founder?
Ooh. I feel like Gallup should really cut me a check, because I advertise for this one personality assessment called Strengths Finders. The premise of the book is like, a lot of people focus on what they're weak at. And this book says, really focus on your strengths and build upon those, because it's then where you're productive, you're happy.
So what about you makes
and
this
so
work?
one of my strengths is activator and also connectedness. And so activator is the person that's like, okay, I know what I got to do. Like, let's run, let's do it. Like, let's move. And then connectedness is like, but let me bring people along with me.
Right. You're actually talking about the 2 greatest strengths that you have are the 2 most difficult steps in the reinvention process, which is connect and move. And what you're saying is at your core, that's just who you are.
That's just who I am.
And that's what I do.
Yeah.
And you can't do that in a limited role of having what we have been historically calling a traditional job.
Yeah.
You want to make things and build things and create things that don't exist yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your eyes even light up when I say that. Yeah. Why?
I have a little tagline in the bottom of my email that says, it didn't exist, so I created it. And I just think that's, my time in City Year, like the one thing that they really instilled in us was, Gandhi's mantra, which is be the change you want to see in the world. And so I see gaps in my community. I see gaps in how we connect with each other. And so I seek to fill those gaps.
And historically, instead of those gaps being problems, you are seeing them as opportunities.
Absolutely.
If people want to find out more about you and your work, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yes. So the best way, so I am on Twitter, Netta Lane. Go ahead and find me on Twitter. But the other thing is my website, storiesand.strikingly.com, where you can find information on Pedal the Porch, Dinner for 30, and I also host storytelling workshops. So if you're interested in any of those 3 things, please holler at me.
This is phenomenal. You're a wonderful person. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Jody, we promised that we were going to take our listenership onto the whole next level of how to tell stories. And Cornetta did not disappoint, did she?
Yeah, Cornetta, as I said, she's a very interesting example of how storytelling started from this deep personal need to process a traumatic event. And for her, storytelling is kind of what pushed her out of this depression caused by the death of her father. And this need to tell his story and to honor him is what really prompted this for her. But the cathartic feeling she got and the healing that she experienced as a result of doing the storytelling is really, I think, for her, what opened up to her eyes that others could benefit from this too. So whereas Eric, earlier in this month, we were talking about the value of storytelling for the listener of the story, right? Whether it's your customer, your client,
right,
or the value of storytelling internally to build a culture and some diversity in your staff. Cornetta takes it deeper. And she talks about the value to the actual storyteller themselves.
Well, it was a huge next step for Cornetta. As I listened to Cornetta talk to us about this very, very important next step in storytelling, which I really hadn't put together, I began to understand that people couldn't go with you on this journey unless you actually invited them to go with you. So it's one thing to say and tell people your story, but that's different than inviting people to actually go with you on this story. And that's something that Cornetta's been able to understand and figure out and actually invite people to be a part of it. And by doing so, Jody, it seems that's where the emotional connection takes place.
Right. That's for the momentum and this, it becomes more than just my story. It becomes the collective story for our group that others want to buy into and can relate to bits and pieces. So this idea that she would use storytelling to start to connect neighborhoods and this neighborhood narrative so that it didn't die, right? Because as Detroit experiences this reinvention, there is this potential concern that a pre-existing culture of a specific neighborhood could come in and get rebranded as this whole new place. And yet you have individuals still living in that neighborhood that remember their story very differently.
Right.
So it's a way to keep the history alive and invite the new history to become a part.
And as we learned from Eric, it's okay to have that variability. Yeah. What we don't want to have is every story be the same, right? Yeah. That's the lesson we learned from the past that we don't want to do. The key is you can have unlimited stories if you allow that variation to come in and actually create an ecosystem around that story by having the old there, the new there, people who are visiting and learning coming in. And it really began to impact me in understanding, because I would have been of the mindset before I'd talked to Cornetta, I'd have been in the mindset, people don't want to go on that journey. I mean, that's
very personal. They're going to
a little too personal. Yeah. And yet what I learned was you can invite people in to be a part of the journey in a way that makes everyone comfortable and really enhances the ability for everybody to then own the next journey. And when you start to layer then those stories on top of each other, look at the move possibilities that you get, because all of the ways in which those people who've collided at that particular point to be a part of that particular story have the opportunity to reconnect in different ways and continue to build new and different stories based on the collision points that you first created when everybody was on the same porch.
Right. And because you're connecting emotionally and people are opting in, you're not telling them to be a part of it. They're willingly kind of gravitating towards it. There's a momentum there. And that's what drives the movement.
Yes. And that's what takes the storytelling to the very next level. We miss that in either thinking, A, that storytelling is not important because we've sanitized it, or B, we've thought that the storytelling is only one-dimensional. I get to talk, you get to listen, you get to hear my story. What we really have failed to understand up until this point is this conversation about how I invite people in to be a part of the story. And when that happens, all of a sudden, every possibility becomes real.
So if you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it pure reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter at Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.